Hi, it's me, Stephanie, Soror, and I just wanted to do another video, which I haven't done for a while. So when I woke up this morning, I read the daily Bible portion, the Tanakh Yomi, provided by the Sefaria website, and I was slightly disturbed that it is regarding 1 Samuel 23:4, which I think some fundamentalists, Jews in Israel, Orthodox, the Netanyahu administration in particular, might interpret it as being an excuse to end this temporary hostage negotiation and resume violence in the Gaza Strip. And this is because in this passage, David, when he is hiding out from King Saul, he breaks his alliance with the Philistines at the time and decides to help his fellow Judahites attack the Philistines in the city or the region of Keilah. And he does this by consulting Tetragrammaton. We presume that it's in regards to the ancient Hebrew oracle, the divination device known as the Urim and Thummim. Anyways, I think that for myself, I used to be a Christian Zionist. I'm still Zionist, but I'm a Jewish Zionist. I'm no longer a fundamentalist Christian. I am a Jew, a mystical Jew, a Kabbalist. But when I was a fundamentalist, a dispensationalist, a Christian Zionist, I interpreted the current Palestinians, so-called, who are really probably displaced Jordanians and Egyptians based on the historical context of the Middle East. But anyways, since they identify with the ancient Philistines, I used to be like, well, then let's treat them like the Philistines biblically and not be very nice to them. It was my own bigotry, my own prejudice and hatred towards them, which I no longer hold that because there's deep complications. Now, there's debate about whether or not the current Palestinians can or cannot be directly related to the ancient Philistines. Now, there are several problems with this because the current so-called Palestinians, who are probably displaced Jordanians and Egyptians historically, are Arabians. They're Muslim Arabians ethnically. And although the origin of the ancient Philistines is difficult, the majority of academic scholars believe that they came from the Aegean, probably Cyprus, and were more related to the ancient Minoans or the ancient Greeks than they are to the Arabians, although some academic scholars think that they might have been native Canaanites, so possibly Semites or Arabians that were living in the land of Canaan, possibly related to the Phoenicians who became the Philistines. So, but whether or not the current so-called Palestinians can be identified with the ancient Philistines, there's complications in regards to that. One, we're talking two different people displaced by, centuries. And even in the Bible, King David, he made alliances with the Philistines. They weren't treated like the ancient Amalekites where it was just complete genocide. There definitely was compromise. They were considered enemies, and I would say Hamas is a terrorist organization, and what they did in October was just horrible. But I do think the Netanyahu response has been disproportionate, killing 4,000 innocent Palestinians in revenge for Palestinians killing 1,000 innocent Israelis is just, it's not right on both sides. That needs to stop. We need shalom, we need peace in the area. One thing I think would be interesting is to look at the astrological aspects. We have the full moon tomorrow, and this full moon is in Gemini. It is in opposition to Mars conjunct the sun, which I think bodes inauspicious in regards to possible violence. I think if you look at the Astrology podcast with Mr. Chris Brennan and Mr. Austin Kabak, you will see that I think it might be enlightening to look at the Astrology podcast with Mr. Chris Brennan, especially the forecasts for the recent forecasts from September, October, November, and this current one with December, just to see how the astrology just seems to really fit the context of what's going on and help understand the astrological, the natural cycle aspects involved in this, and some of their fears that this full moon in Gemini might also lead to an escalation in the violence. So anyways, that's what I wanted to share. I'm going to probably do a brief analysis of my tarot card reading, and also an examination of the biblical passage of 1 Samuel 23:4. Now, I think it is important to understand the relationship associated today between the moon and the nation of Israel in Judaism. We have with the Talmud this idea that the Shekinah goes into exile with the Jews when they're in the dispersion. This is Tractate Megillah 29a. And later in the Kabbalistic tradition, this Shekinah becomes the divine feminine aspect of God. And I think this is important to understand because it shows that the lunar cycles and the moon, such as the lunar eclipse at the end of October, this full moon just recently, and the coincidence of these things being connected to the escalation of violence in the Middle East right now in regards to the Gaza Strip, I think is important to understand. Okay, so here we have the original Hebrew text of 1 Samuel 23:4 from the Masoretic text. So reading right to left, we have V'yosef od David lishol ba'Adonai v'ya'anehu Adonai v'yomer kum red ke'ilah ki ani noten et pelishtim biyadecha. So, and yet again, David inquired with the Tetragrammaton, and Tetragrammaton answered him, and Tetragrammaton said, "Arise, descend to Keilah, as I deliver direct objects," so these Philistines, plural, "into your hand." So the black represent the Hebrew consonants, the blue represent the Hebrew vowels, vowel points, the nikudim, and the red represent the Hebrew intonation accents, the ta'amim. So normally we would chant the Hebrew text, but because of the dire situation in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine, I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to give you the intonations. So, Kadma Azla, Yativ, Pashta, Munak, Zakef Gadol, Tibaka, Ethnakta, Reve'i, Yativ, Munak, Zakef Gadol, Merka, Tefir, Tibaka, Siluk Sof Pasuk. So there are two different types of these accent points, the ta'amim, which are also the intonation. They actually serve three purposes. One, punctuation. Two, accent. And three, cantillation. So as they function as the accents, it means the accent is on this syllable, this syllable, this syllable, this syllable. Hopefully that makes sense. The intonation was what I already gave, like the yativ is how you would sing it. As far as punctuation, we have two different types of accents. We have the disjunctives, known in Latin as the distinctivi, and the domini, distinctivi being disjunctive, domini meaning like lords, and then you have the conjunctivi, the conjunctives, which are also known as the servi, the servants. Now the disjunctives are divided into four groups. The first group are known as the imperatores in Latin, the emperors. The second group are known as the reges, the kings in Latin. The third ones are known as the duces, the dukes in Latin, and the fourth category are known as the comites, the counts in Latin. The most important are the imperatores, the emperors, the first group of disjunctives, and there's two of them. There's the ethnakta and the siluk sofpasuk. These are kind of used together. So these two divide the sentence in half. So the first part of the sentence would be this ethnakta phrase, and then the second half of the sentence would be this siluk sofpasuk phrase. So next we have the second batch of disjunctives, and there's two in this example. So we have the tipka and the zakef katon. So they basically divide these into a second group. So in this first half, which is the ethnakta phrase, we also have a zakef katon phrase divided by a tipka phrase. So it divides this half in half again. And the same thing's going on down here with the second siluk sofpasuk phrase. So we have the first part, which is again a zakef katon phrase, and the second one, which is again this tipka phrase. Then next we divide them even further with the remaining four disjunctives. So in this case, we divide this first phrase here with the pashta, and then we divide this phrase here with, again, the Zakef Katon. And we divide this phrase here, again, with the Tipaka Ethnakta. So this one gets divided into 3. And then down here, we have the Revi'i phrase. With the Lakef Katon. And then down here we have the Tevi'ir phrase. And then the Merka, or the Tipaka Siluk Sopasuk phrase. So as far as the conjunctives, we have the Kadma Azla, we have the Munak, we have another Munak, and we have the Mercha. Now there's also what appears to be a Saluk, but they're actually called a Metheg. We have one here, and we have one here. And they usually signify like a different pronunciation, but in this case, they're both probably serving as like a pausal note. In this case, probably because this prefixes the tetragrammaton, and here because there's just so many syllables that it just, I think, helps to break it up. So the simple, unaugmented Hebrew verbal stem is known as the Baal or the Kal, and this is what it looks like. So we have, reading from right to left, a Kametz, and then a Patak, and then a third consonant that doesn't have a vowel point, a Nikud. And that's because most Hebrew words, whether they be nouns or verbs, usually consist of 3 Hebrew consonants, and these are called the Hebrew root words. So in regards to this first Hebrew verb, Yosef, it derives from the 3-letter Hebrew root word, Yosaf, which basically means to add something to something else. As for the second Hebrew verb, Sha'ol, it derives from the 3-letter Hebrew root word Sha'al, which basically means to ask something of someone or something. As for this third Hebrew vowel, Ya'anehu, it derives from the 3-letter Hebrew root word Ana, which basically means to answer something to someone or something. This Hebrew verb is a little bit trickier, right? Because it actually drops one of its consonants, in this case the yod, in the 3-letter Hebrew root word yarad, which basically means to go down somewhere or to descend. This Hebrew verb, noten, derives from the 3-letter Hebrew root word nathan, which basically means to give something to someone or something. However, in this case, I prefer the translation deliver. Okay, so here is my brief analysis of these cards. Now, as far as the heart of the matter, I think it really applies because my question was essentially regarding whether or not the current peace regarding the exchange of hostages between the Israelis and the Palestinians will come to an end. And so this is definitely the truth, the energy of the moon, Luna in Libra, being contrasted with Mars in Gemini. So I think this is definitely a violent end to this truce by the Netanyahu administration, and specifically Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, who represents the King of Wands, in my opinion, this fire sign acting in a very fiery, willful manner. As far as the current situation, I think what we have is, let me see, a watery sign acting in a practical manner. So I think this is the hostage negotiation. You really have the energy of Jupiter and Capricorn here with this exchange, this careful balance of exchange, and also with a water sign acting in a fiery manner. So I think this is what's going on right now during this full moon currently, is this exchange of hostages, but it's an uneasy exchange. As far as the near future, if we stay on the same track, currently I think we see, this celebration of the exchange of hostages turning into a deep sorrow as the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, begins to attack the Gaza Strip again. So I really think that you have, with the Mars and Scorpio energy here, being this whole violent end to this current uneasy tension of the hostage negotiation, and Mercury in Cancer being this current celebration really coming to an end. Now, as far as circumstances that are within the control of the situation, we have obviously Libra, the seeking of balance, justice in regards to this. Basically a fire sign acting in a very earthy manner, but with a conflict, but not like a serious conflict, more of strife. And this is the energy of Saturn working in Leo. So I think, we can seek true justice if we are practical about our intentions, and dealing with the fact that there's going to be strife between the Israelis and Palestinians, but it doesn't have to lead to violence. Now, as far as the fate of the matter, we have Taurus, we have the Hierophant, I think representing that there is some sort of divine providence, especially like there's a religious aspect to all of this, which is in play, which cannot be changed. This Sun in Aries, the sense of there's going to be a sense of, I think, the Israeli government, the Netanyahu administration, wanting to seek dominance in the area, and basically a failure. You have Saturn in Taurus here, which is this loss of land, perhaps loss of parts of the Gaza Strip would be my guess in regards to Palestinians, or it could be the Israelis, but I'm thinking Palestinians. I think this is Israel and the Palestinians. So I think this is aspects that we just cannot change. This is the fate. So regarding the pentagrammaton instead of tetragrammaton, because the significator card, which I chose for Israel, was the Knight of Swords, representing a air sign acting in a very airy manner, an aggressive, violent, ideological manner. So that left us, since it was found in the first Hey deck of the tetragrammaton, Yod Hey Vav Hey, we ended up with 5 cards left over instead of 4, representing the Pentagrammaton, Yod, He, Shin, Vav, He. So the Yod card is definitely the Ace of Wands, showing a new current of will. The first He card is the Empress, which is Venus, which is a very motherly energy, seeking to find some sort of compromise. And then, you have Pluto here with the Judgment card being a very explosive, destructive kind of element in the Shin card. And then with the Vav, you have basically the energy of Saturn in Pisces, which, it looks like just a giving up. Like, this is just so emotionally horrible that we're just walking away from it. And then this idea of like a death, but like a meditative understanding of death, which is definitely your Jupiter and Libra aspects. So I think, again, I like to leave this part very mystical, but it seems like, there's definitely an assertion of will by the Israeli government, wanting to have control of the land, which is causing more violence after this temporary truce, which is just going to cause people just to be discouraged, but maybe beginning to contemplate and meditate what this all means in a larger spiritual context. Now, I do not believe in mere coincidence. I believe in providence. I think it is a bit curious that this tiny little state of Israel, Palestine, whatever you call it, is only about the size of New Jersey, and yet it's become this world controversy. Isaiah 34:8, it's become a cup of trembling, a burden stone. Zechariah 12:3-4. So I don't think this is because the Bible is some ineffable, inspired word of God. I'm not a supernaturalist. I think that supernaturalism is an absurd superstition. I do believe in providence, and I think that what's behind these biblical prophecies, so-called prophecies, is the astrology. I think that when we look at the natural cyclical rhythms of nature, I think that astrology, although it's not an exact science, does appear to be an algorithm where you can predict these cycles of history to a certain extent. Now, I realize that a lot of academic, critical biblical scholars, such as Dr. James Tabor, Dr. Dan McClellan, Dr. Joshua Bowen, people whose YouTube videos I often share on my Facebook website, I think just they would be critical of me even looking at the Bible predictively. But I think that they fail to understand academic scholars such as Mr. Chris Brennan, Mr. Austin Kopek, Mr. Dan Waits, Mr. S.J. Anderson, and others who demonstrate how astrology seems to be rather curious in how exact it is, in regards to how it explains our current events, our current modes of thinking, our current biases, and just probably the causes behind it all. Now, I do my best to be also a critical academic biblical scholar. However, I'm also a mystic. I'm a Kabbalist, and so I derive meaning spiritually from the Bible and other scriptural texts, even outside of Judaism. And therefore, I'm not limiting myself to a purely academic standard, although I try to emphasize that that is the main basis of interpretation, but then also providing a deeper mystical interpretation as well, from astrology, from tarot, and these other types of things. Shalom, peace from Stephanie Michelle Soror Samhain.